We always have to walk the line of serving, historically underserved entrepreneurship, but make sure that they're being included in the events that we have for everyone else. Because I feel like it can be such a fine line between programming for excluded populations to segregating those populations even more. So it's a very fine line. In what I've discovered, I personally, when I first started in entrepreneurship, I was really young and I didn't know anyone. And that was, to me, what I feel like I would have been much more successful if I would have reached out and I would have made those connections. So I would say that not just for the success of your business, but for your mental health is good. It's good to be able to connect with people that that are either going through what you're going through or have gone through it already and can help you. So my big advice or urge is...
This conversation is with Claudia Scott. Claudia works with historically underserved entrepreneurs, providing funding and helping them in their businesses. It was quite refreshing to hear her define this set of entrepreneurs. For example, if you have an event where you say, this event is for entrepreneurs of African descent, how do you balance that invitation so as not to make it sound like they versus we? Interested? My name is Ola Williams, and this is the Small Business Startup School.
Growing up, so I'm actually an immigrant from Costa Rica. I moved to Arkansas about 10 years ago. I'm also a woman, and I have Tourette syndrome. So I have all of these things that I feel like check boxes that make me a little different. And growing up, all I wanted to do, or what I told my parents I wanted to do, was make money. So I tried a career in banking and hated it. And then took some time off to realize, what I was good at and what I was also passionate about. And a big thing for me was being able, or just knowing and feeling that my job and what I do every day impacts the community around me, directly, and I can almost touch it. That was a big thing, especially if that role or, work that I was doing helped people like me, minorities or women or people with a disability or neurodiverse. So that was a big one for me, was not only having a job that made me go a hamster in a wheel, but a job that would let me impact the lives of people around me, but also people that didn't have the same tools and resources as everyone else.
That's so beautiful, because you feel connected, and people, with the context that you shared, people that you serve, they will feel connected with you as well, because there's a common ground, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important, especially when working with historically underserved populations, is you have to establish a relationship first, because the first thing, and I see it, as an immigrant or, with an aunt that moved here years ago, and it's always, what's the catch? We always have to be hyper aware of, are these people trying to help me or hurt me? So I think the biggest thing for me is always establishing a relationship. Make sure, there's mutual respect, and then there's trust, because then it's easier to not only help people around me, but if I have to give them feedback, working in entrepreneurship, not every idea is great off the beginning, and you have to do some pivoting and some feedback. And I think that's so much more well received when the person knows it's coming from someone who has their best interest in mind.
So how do you do that? How do you communicate to your target clients that, you have their best interest at heart?
Yeah, so it is complicated because there's so many groups, So we always have to walk the line of serving, historically underserved entrepreneurship, but make sure that they're being included in the events that we have for everyone else. Because I feel like it can be such a fine line between programming for excluded populations to segregating those populations even more. So it's a very fine line. And what I've discovered is that doing programming that is focused on certain exclusivity categories that are not only related to sex or race is a big one. So something that we're starting next year that I'm incredibly passionate about is some programming for single parents, neurodiverse entrepreneurs have had some sort of criminal past. And then, we're trying to target all other groups like farmers. So we open that to everyone, but we make sure these people have also been historically underserved. So I think one of the biggest things is that make sure every program, every event, every webinar we does is very intentional. We're very intentional with the name. We're very intentional with who we invite to speak, make sure that it represents everyone around us. So the intentionality of it has a lot to do with it, because I think people are smart, even if you make a mistake, they will be able to know that you did it, you don't have a bad intention. So I feel like, creating those very, very tailored programming. And then also for me is making an effort to meet people where they are. So one of the big things I do, so I always share my personal phone number with our clients. And I tell them, if you don't feel comfortable speaking on the phone, you can always text me, because one big thing is English may not be their first language, and they may not be comfortable making a phone call because that's nerve-wracking. Another big thing is we used to only allow people when they came for an application for a loan or capital. It always had to be in person, but then we quickly realized that is another barrier. People may not have a driver's license. People may not have a car. People may not be able to take off work if it's a factory job. So we've established ways that we can meet people where they are. And I feel like that's a big part of building trust, because then they can tell your intention.
I like when you said that you're very intentional about facilitating programs that are targeted to people that are like maybe visible minorities, that have been excluded. At the same time, that there's a fine balance between doing that and not, further making them feel excluded, because I think that happens a lot. As
All
a
the
person
time.
of color, I feel that happens a lot. Like the point is, don't let me feel excluded, and then the program is kind of like, that's the
more
point.
exclusion. Yes. I see a lot with like programming for Hispanic or Latino people, where it's like, oh, we'll have this programming, but we're only inviting Latino people. We're only speaking Spanish. But I'm like, that doesn't make me feel comfortable to eventually walk into a room where I'm the only Latina, because I'm not used to it. So like, I think that's it. And it is a fine line. And I think we make mistakes because it's a weird thing to navigate. But I've been thinking and this is just a plan I have, but, we do a lot of, in the community, there's a lot of events, particularly for Black History Month, but I don't want an event that just feels that only a certain group of people are welcome. So something I've been, thinking about is how can we highlight our Black owned businesses while also making sure it's included for everyone. So something I've been thinking about is doing like a culinary experience where we bring Black owned businesses and chefs and companies to do like a sample of every, their special or best product, and have someone play music, but then it's open to the whole community. So everyone comes regardless of race, gender, but we're still able to celebrate Black history. So I think that's the fine line, is how do we celebrate but not segregate?
I love that. That is so important. Yeah. So how do you define historically underserved, entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So, and I think at very surface level, the first thing people think about with underserved populations is women, people of color, immigrants, refugees, LGBTQIA. That's, I feel like, surface level, but I feel like that's the tip of the iceberg. And like every iceberg, the big chunk of it is what you don't see. So I don't know that I have an exact definition for, underserved entrepreneurship, because I think it also includes our neurodiverse minorities, our single parents, our, people with criminal conviction, it includes veterans. So really, I would say anything that has made you in life not have the same tools and resources as everyone else, en masse, especially. So now here in the US, especially where we live, it's a particularly white Caucasian area, but also white Caucasian people can also be historically underserved. We've seen this with LGBTQIA, women, veterans. So I think it's also more of just what resources and tools have you had? And if you haven't had the same access as most of the people around you, then you're underserved.
That's beautiful to know. I like the way you say that. When you haven't had the resources like most people around you, then you are underserved. I love that definition. So let's talk. Yeah.
I think that just kind of shifts the conversation from what we always think, which is race and gender, and it opens it into everyone. If 90 or 80% of people around you had internet and food and money and a car, but you didn't, even though you look exactly like them, you're underserved.
Absolutely beautiful. And
thank you.
Agreed.
Good.
Yeah. So let's. How about what are the financial resources designed for this population? Where do we what's that? Where do we get that? What's that program like?
Yeah. So Startup Junkie, it's been around for quite a while, I think a little over a decade. And we do have our foundation side, which is our nonprofit side. And although I do lead part of like the loan and the capital, one of my very, big reasons why I love the company and the culture is because it's not just one type of tool that we're offering our entrepreneurs. It's more of like a holistic approach. So like I mentioned, we have programming, we have events, like I mentioned, and we do, like I said, we try to be intentional. We do lunch and learn. So those are like 1 hour during lunch, but we also do programming in the afternoons for people that can't take off during the day. So that's one big part is the education and the workshops, but there is so many others. We do the Kiva Loans. So they're crowdfunded microloans that are at no interest and no fees to our entrepreneurs in the area. We have an accelerator program that's also under Startup Junkie. We have 2 podcasts. So we have one in English and one in Spanish. I started the one in Spanish about a year ago and it's done phenomenally. We have networking. We just have all kinds of stuff. And we do have a thrift store that's also under Startup Junkie, and all of their profits go to grants in our area. So one of the big things that I tell people is you can come to us without knowing exactly what it is that you need, because we can try to, find out what that is and then build it for you, or we can always point you the right direction. So a lot of people are like, well, can I come even if I don't want a loan, or can I be a part, get involved even though I don't want to go to events, I just want loans? Yes. Like, we are here to give you all of it or parts of it. And I think it is very holistic in the sense that if someone gets a loan with us, but then they realize that they don't know much about marketing, or they don't know much about, how to do the finances, then we'll do programs and workshops to tackle those. So you not only get capital, you're getting all of this resources. We also offer one-on-one consulting, and we have a list of subject matter experts, like mentors, that we can contact the entrepreneur with, and it's all at no cost. So let's say they come in for a one-on-one consulting, they might, the end of it might be 2 years from now when they've already had 3 mentors, multiple consulting meetings, and they are ready to get capital. So it does kind of like tackle most of the areas of what being an entrepreneur is. To us, the big thing is, I feel like entrepreneurship can be a very isolating career because you are expected to wear hundreds different hats. And the reality is we're all human and we can't do 100 different things. We need to lean on community partners or entrepreneurial support organizations like us to be able to lighten the load a little bit, and in the hopes that it's not as alienating and lonely as it can be. So connecting with people that are like-minded or that have gone through it can be so helpful. And I think personally, it can be that thing that helps you from being successful or not successful.
Yeah, there's entrepreneurship definitely can be an isolating career. I was so blown away by what you were saying, because I so relate because I am an entrepreneur myself.
Yeah.
So you do education, and am I right in, presuming that could be done online from anywhere? So somebody could just connect with Startup Junkie and they could still get educated online, virtually, right?
So most of our consulting meetings are on Zoom. So, unless the entrepreneur requests an in-person meeting, most of them are done through Zoom. And then we also offer multiple events fully on Zoom. So we have next week a webinar on how to start, how to access financing, and that's all online. We have one that's how to start, the business process. That's all online. And lately, what we've been offering too is if we have an event in person, we'll live stream it on social media. So you really can catch, you don't even have to register for that one. You can just catch it online. So like I said, we're always trying to find ways to make what we do much more accessible and then open to more people, because we do believe that what we're doing is needed and is helpful to people way beyond just Arkansas.
I believe it's needed as well.
So financial education on this episode, I'm going to use Vision Board quickly as an example. For 2024, I had 8 goals on my Vision Board. Now, 5 of those goals were feeder goals, and 3 of those goals were financial assets. So what I mean by feeder goals are those 5 goals that I need to actively work on to be able to build the other 3, which are called financial assets. Now, by the time I looked at it recently, in this month of November, I found out that those 5, I'm very well on my way to actively working on them. And once I have been able to achieve them, then I can now build the 3 financial assets on that Vision Board. Well, try it. You don't even have to have 8 goals. You could just make sure you have something that you call active work that can feed the financial assets on your Vision Board.
So I guess the next thing I wanted to ask is, I know we've talked about the online thing, about the education. So, and I know some of our listeners are in Canada, in other regions. So let's use Canada as an example. Yeah. I am in Canada. So the part about, accessing financial resources or getting all those kind of supports, are you able to help people that are outside of the US, or is it limited to the US? It's just good if listeners are able to know.
So we have a Kiva hub. So the best way to think about it in regular terms, it's almost like a little franchise or office of Kiva, but Kiva is an international nonprofit. So there is Kiva everywhere in the world, including Canada, Costa Rica, where I'm from, Europe, Africa, everywhere. In the US, there are hubs. There are hubs all over in the States. We were the first one for Arkansas in 2019, but the resources are largely the same internationally as well. So, and I've had, because a lot of people are like, okay, well, since I'm outside of Arkansas, I can't contact you. There was one weekend that somehow a press release got shared in some out-of-state, social media accounts or something. And I got probably 10 to 15 calls for loans, and none of them were in Arkansas. But I still took every one of them because I was able to write down, their contact, where they were from, and then connect them to the person that could give them that capital in their state. So I would always say, contact, email, don't worry about where you're from. If we can't help you, we can try to point you out to the right person. So I wouldn't let that deter. We've had, especially with the podcast too, we've had guests from everywhere. We do them in person and on Zoom, so that we try as much as we can to get those barriers lowered for entry.
So how do you spell Kiva?
Yeah, Kiva. Kiva. Yes, it's a word in Swahili, and it escapes me what it means now, but that's where it started in Uganda in 2005. So that's where they got the word.
Nice, yeah. So in the work that you do, Claudia, have you noticed any particular industry where the underserved, entrepreneurs thrive more? It should just be interesting to know from your experience.
Like, you mean like if, if they focus on more of a career field or industry?
Yeah, where you've noticed more success, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would, I've gotten asked about success stories a lot, and it's hard because we do have a little bit of everything. I mean, we have funded someone that was doing an app. We have funded a lot of food related businesses, but then we funded a photography business or a video business. So we're actually funding just now, like in the people that are funding right now, one is in construction, one is in beauty, someone else is in ice cream and dessert. So we have all kinds of areas. I will say 85% of all of our loans that we've done so far, I think we're at 150 for the last 4 years. 80% or 85 are women-owned businesses. So I would say definitely we try, and that is something that we're glad, but we also do try. We're very intentional with where we want our messaging and our word to spread. And Kiva has a very big mission of being, available for underserved populations. So I would say we have a lot of our loans gravitate to women-owned business or minorities. So out of all of them, I think 92 identify as some kind of minority. So most of our loans, which is our goal, go to historically underserved populations. We were able to up our number of Hispanic applicants, and our Black and African American actually has been steady for 3 years. And we were able to triple the application from Asian American and Pacific Islanders in the last year. So I would say we definitely try to target those as much as possible. In industry related, I would say food related businesses, and then beauty businesses are big, like hair extensions or lashes. So we get a lot of those too, but we've had a plethora of businesses. One of the things that we are the proudest is just how much of our clients are underserved, because that's what we want to make sure we target. We've really recently done our first non-binary loan. So that was a great cause for us and something that we really want to tap into. And then in 2025, we're hoping to target more farmers and more people with a criminal past. That one's a big one, I think, for me, because Kiva is one of the very few places where someone that's had a criminal conviction can come get a loan. And I think it's a part of the population that we don't really think of much and can have such an entrepreneurial drive. So that's one of our big hopes for next year.
Interesting. So I've always believed food business is really important and impactful because we have all got to eat. And I was going to ask you the why, but you just answered that. Why you're developing plans and programs for people with criminal convictions, and the why of the farmers, without being presumptuous, I think is obvious because we have got to eat, that's making an impact there. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the big thing with our agricultural and farming loans is that they're the only industry that gets a 6-month reprieve in their loan payment. So everyone else has to start paying 1 month after. Our agricultural clients get 6 months of reprieve on the payment. So that's a big deal because Kiva's even taken into account the fact that you need to grow your crops, and so that's the reason why. And we've had actually 4 or 5 farming loans this year, which is a big increase from the past. So we're always trying to tackle those historically underserved that people don't usually think as historically underserved.
Yeah. I know that from the work that I do, I know that angel investors, venture capitalists, some of those same people, they believe they fund projects or, companies that they believe in the cause, they believe in what the company is doing. For example, your cause is serving, historically underserved communities or entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to just understand, and I believe somebody listening here may want to know, did you work with investors in such
Yeah.
in such manners. And if somebody were like an entrepreneur that is looking to, oh, how do I even connect with such investors that have the same kind of belief, what would be your advice?
So we're located in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas particularly, which is where Walmart was born. So this is a part of the state that has seen just incredible boom in the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years in investment, entrepreneurial, accelerators. There's multiple accelerators and venture studios and ESO. So it really is, I would say, a mecca and this little bubble of so many resources for entrepreneurs. But people don't really know this because we're in Arkansas. And, I remember not knowing where Arkansas was when I lived in Costa Rica. But one of the things, like I explained, we do have our Fuel Accelerator. So that's a program that brings companies from all over the world, gets them in here for a few weeks. And the results that we've seen on that is amazing. But one of the, most of them do work with VCs and investors. Those are a little bigger scale than what we do at Kiva. But from that, we did see a need of connecting entrepreneurs with VC firms or entrepreneurs with CEOs. So we've done some panels. We've done like a VC days where we invite multiple venture capital firms and then companies as well. And then they can talk. And then usually there's a networking after. So it's on a more strengths networking. I think when people are talking at you, you're like, it can be a little intimidating. So we do make sure that there's like a networking, less pressure time for them to meet. And then we have CEO roundtables where we invite CEOs from, we have venture capital firm or companies in the area that have succeeded or are known to invest or angel investors. And then we get them in contact with the companies. So I would think that has been a very, very helpful one, because we've been able to be that bridge between companies and, their financial future. My best advice, and I tell everyone this because it's something that I've done and it changed my life at one point. But I would say, if you're on LinkedIn and you know of someone that you're like, I feel like this would be a great connection for me, or I really want to know them, or I feel like they would give me very good advice. My best advice is to reach out, to send a LinkedIn message and say, hey, you don't know me, not sales pitchy, even just, hey, this is who I am. I've been following you for a long time, or I feel like your insights are great. Is there any way that you'd be willing to meet with me for 30 minutes on Zoom? I would love to pick your brain, or I would love some mentorship. I would love some guidance. I would say that most people are willing to do that. I mean, clearly, if you message Mark Zuckerberg, he won't reply. I'm clearly on a more realistic level. But what I have found is that people that I don't know that live in Europe, I've messaged them about something they shared, and most of the time they're willing to help. I think because of our world is so digitalized, we still forget that we're all humans and we love connecting, and most people will be open to connect. If you, send the right message or you make that first move. So getting kind of out of that shy space and shoot your shot, I would say that is my best advice.
You're very right. At the end of the day, we are all humans, aren't we? There's so much in that. Give it your best shot. And, you never know. I'm always a big believer of, for every no you get, you are a step closer to your yes. And I've lived that so many times in my life. So to somebody listening, this may be your sign to just go ahead, just ask.
Sometimes all you need, if you message 5 people to see if they'd be willing to mentor you and only one reply, that may be the only yes you will need. Maybe person, I always remember, and this was years ago, I was still in banking. I still didn't like it. And I met someone and I said, I actually didn't meet her. I heard her speak. And then I messaged her. I said, listen, you don't know me. I heard you speak. You were amazing. I felt very inspired. I felt very moved. She messaged back and she's like, would you like to have coffee? And then from that, and we don't even see each other that much anymore. But she was the only yes I needed to change my life. She was able to get me into the space. And it wasn't even like oh my God, we see each other every day. She just felt moved by what I said and said, let me help you. And that really was all I needed. So I would say that maybe because it worked for me, I am partial, but I think as humans, when somebody reaches out and asks for help, I would say for most people, their immediate response is yes. It just sometimes we kind of get lost in the negativity
Yeah.
of this world and we forget that I would say most people are willing to help.
So help. Yeah, that's a very good reminder. Listen, Claudia, we've touched on a lot of things, today. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you would like to say to somebody listening out there?
Yeah, I would say, we mentioned this earlier. Entrepreneurship can be isolating and can be extremely overwhelming, but it can also be incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And I would just absolutely advise and urge people to ask for help. I guarantee that there are many, many resources in everyone's communities. I personally, when I first started in entrepreneurship, I was really young and I didn't know anyone. And that was to me what, I feel like I would have been much more successful if I would have reached out and I would have made those connections. So I would say that not just for the success of your business, but for your mental health is good. It's good to be able to connect with people that are either going through what you're going through or have gone through it already and can help you. So my big advice or urge is to lean on community partners that want you to succeed. It can be nerve-wracking to go to a networking event where you don't know anyone, especially as a person of color. If it's like a predominantly white space, it can be nerve-wracking, but there is nothing like putting yourself out there. So I would say that. And then something that I've closed most of my podcasts with lately is to always remember that as humans, we need grace as much as we need to give grace. This world, like I said, is so digitalized and it goes so fast that we want things to be at our pace and to be how we want them when we want them. And we forget to give ourselves grace and give others grace. Sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes you need to think of you before you think of the business for a second. And then same with other people. So, give grace like you gave me grace when I reschedule our podcast. So that's a big thing for me. I feel like sometimes we can get so stressed and caught up that we're like, oh, this is making me mad, instead of just being empathetic and be graceful with others.
Yeah, thank you for that, Claudia. And you gave me grace this morning as well, just before we started, when I forgot to say something. That is so beautifully said. Listen, Claudia, we have a tradition here. The work that you do, you educate people, you make people learn. Is there anything that you would like to learn as well?
Oh, gosh, yes. I would say I'm constantly learning. One of the things I'm terrible at is being creative. I was always very, very type A and very responsible growing up. So if I wasn't good at something, I wasn't going to try because I didn't want to fail. And that was something that I learned when I was in my late 20s. I was like, I have to learn how to be bad at things and be okay with that, because especially with creative stuff, it's about what you're doing and how you're feeling. So one of the things I've started this year is to be creative. I paint, I color, I take pictures, and I just want to learn more creative stuff. I'm trying to get into crocheting, and I know I'm going to be bad, and I'm loving it. So that is something I'm trying to learn how to be.
Embracing vulnerability.
Yes.
I was telling someone recently, I said, I saw it on social media and it spoke to me. And what I saw is just very related to what you just said. And that thing said, most people are not willing to really suck at something, to be bad at something. But most times experience has shown that you have to be bad at something first before sometimes, So maybe what is really preventing you from being good at what you are supposed to be good at is because you're not willing to be bad at it first. So there you go.
That is actually so funny that you said that, because I shared on my Instagram story yesterday something that said vulnerability is clumsy, but it's the only thing worth anything these days. And I feel like when we learn to be vulnerable with people around us, we can forge those real connections. And you never know when what other people needed from you was for you to show them the non so great parts so that they can be, empowered and uplifted.
Listen, Claudia, it's been so beautiful. And I have learned so much. And I have no doubt that our listeners are going to be, they are going to be very much better listening to this. You've been so generous and so graceful. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, well, I thank you. I appreciate you opening the space. That's needed. That's important. And I'm sure I'm so thankful that you opened this space for me. It was a great conversation.
That's very beautiful. Thank you.